The statement that we perish for lack of knowledge has nothing to do with a Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies. It instead has everything to do with the fact that we lack the knowledge of the evil tactics that white oppressive forces currently deploys against us. If you think that we're no longer being oppressed by white oppressive forces, and instead believes that we're now our own worst enemies, then your intelligence level is exactly where white oppressive forces wants it to be. Because you are totally ignorant of the truth. Welcome to the real world. The truth of the matter is that although most Black people no longer experience the same type of blatant white racist oppressive tactics as our grandparents experienced, we are, however, still in fact being oppressed. The oppression tactics that are currently being deployed against us are now very sophisticated. So sophisticated that they allow white oppressive forces to continue oppressing Black people while simultaneously manipulating us to perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies. Therefore, it allows white oppressive forces to continue oppressing Black people without any Black resistance. The white society's oppression of Black people always works best when the Black victims no longer recognizes how the oppression is being done. Case, point, and proof. Here's how Black people are being systematically oppressed throughout our entire educational development. Education is much more than a matter of developing students' cognitive ability in maths, language, and science. It is the process of imparting information, knowledge, and values which best enables students to realize their highest potential. Studies show that how children behave is greatly influenced by what they're taught to believe about themselves. Therefore, it is extremely important that children be taught of the many contributions made by their particular racial group. Students can then reference these messages about their particular group to acquire their self-image and assess their potential and capabilities in relation to these information. Therefore, an educational setting that properly nurtures the aspiration and potential of a child is one that includes the many contributions made by the child's particular race or group. This is a basic human need, and it is the basis that children use as a point of reference for their potential. It is particularly important for children living under difficult circumstances to know about and be able to identify with members of their group who can help them feel good about being members of that group. This basic human need is being deliberately withheld from Black students during our entire educational development. White governed schools do not provide a racially affirming curriculum to Black students, as they routinely does so for white students. They instead intentionally give Black students a marginalized version of their history. It's a marginalized version designed to instill the myth of white superiority and Black inferiority into the subconscious minds of Black students. It is a classroom setting in which the majority of the achievements and contributions made by Black people throughout history are being systematically, deliberately withheld from Black students throughout their entire education development. Black students are taught from curriculums that primarily exalts the history and achievements of Caucasians only, while marginalizes their own. In fact, for many Black students, Black children, their schools are in fact the places where they first experience the implication that there's something lesser about being born Black. The white educational system's failure to adequately provide Black students with a racially affirming curriculum as it routinely does so for white students, is actually essential for maintaining white dominance. Because for a ruling class to maintain its position of social dominance over its oppressed population, they must condition the oppressed from a very early age to accept their own subordinate status and to adhere to the authority of the dominant culture. To do so, the education given to the oppressed population from the time that their minds are young and most impressionable must be the type that denies them of a racially affirming curriculum. When the oppressed population is denied of a racially affirming curriculum, this conditions them to perceive themselves through a subordinate status that makes them accept their subordinate position within the society. Even the brightest among them may have little of any hope of mentally extracting themselves from their assigned low dominated position within the society. This is what's being secretly done to black students. It's an oppression tactic. It's the true reason why black people learn more black racially affirming facts from each other than we do so from within our white governed schools. This black racially devaluing curriculum is being pumped into the young impressionable minds of black students, generations of black students, without being counterbalanced by an equal amount of positive black racially affirming education. Consequently, black students must constantly resist the negative perception of being black implicit in an educational curriculum almost exclusively dedicated to the white society. This is the truth. Furthermore, black students are subjected to this demoralizing miseducation for 7 hours a day from the age of 5 to 18. Clearly, considerable damages can be done to the self-esteem and self-image of many black students within such a large time frame. During the educational development of black students, they are literally being subconsciously conditioned to believe lesser of themselves and to believe more highly of whites. Black students are actually being socially engineered during their education development period to adhere to white dominance over their lives, while white students are being miseducated to believe that they're inherently superior and are therefore supposed to rule over black people. Schools are tools of the government designed to mold the student's character accordingly to the will of the government. And although white governments publicly professes equality for all their citizens, in reality, they are unrelentingly committed towards the preservation of their nation's white social dominance over their black population. This unrelenting commitment necessitates that black students be socially engineered during their educational development to accept their subordinate status within a society dominated by the white culture. The white society will never give black students an education that truly liberates us. They will instead always miseducate black students to think in ways that serves and protects the system of white supremacy. You know, our core problem as black people is that most of us cannot see that our minds are being systematically, perpetually manipulated to think in ways that serves and protects the system of white supremacy. Here's another case, point and proof. When you critically think, can you not see just how cartoonishly unrealistic it actually is that virtually all information that we receive about ourselves from the white society are consistently negative and black racially demoralizing? Think how cartoonishly unrealistic that is. Here's what's really going on. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually an insidious, black, racially demoralizing, divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralize, divide, and rule is a method of maintaining control over a large targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hatred and division between the targeted population. This propaganda campaign is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects black people to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this control system, fraudulent black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population. Without being challenged or counterbalanced by an equal amount of black positive racially affirming information. It conveys the subliminal message that black people are now our own worst enemies and that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it negatively impacts the black population in terms of our behaviors. Keeping us believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves is how white oppressive forces now prevents us from unifying ourselves against them. People are easily controlled by the information that they repetitively receive about themselves, especially when they're unaware that the information has been distorted to invoke specific responses from them. When people are constantly fed negative information about themselves, they become demoralized, divided, and self-loathing. And they also become more compliant with their oppressor's dominance over their lives. In fact, many will even prefer it. It also creates a profound black self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people. And as long as we're kept within this condition, we can then be ruled over forever. And it doesn't matter that the information presented to us is untrue. Most people will respond accordingly to the information because they've all received the same false information. This nefarious psychological warfare tactic works by tapping into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave millions of black people. This is all possible because the white society writes all black narratives and controls all black mainstream media images. They therefore literally owns black people's interpretation of our collective state. This is also possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving people certain information and media images every so often, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an implied objective. Some black people have been so heavily demoralized by the white society's constant fraudulent negative depictions about our racial group that many literally finds it easier to continue believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves than to accept the truth that we're being lied to as a means of controlling us. Some black people have been so heavily demoralized by the white society's negative depictions of us that some tries to now separate themselves from the black population. This is a psychic adjustment that's called disidentification. This is where the painful embarrassment of being black is lessened by ceasing to identify with the black masses. These are those black people that often becomes what social scientists calls the members of the black buffer class. They're called the black buffer class because nowadays, before we can even confront the system of white supremacy, we often have to first fight against these black people that have been brainwashed to defend the system of white supremacy. They literally function as the buffer zone between the white establishment and the black masses. These are the ones among us that we most often call sellouts and black traitors, like Senator Tim Scott, or the media personality like Candace Owens or Jesse Lee Peterson, and many more. Those black people that insist that they confirm their negative assessments about our racial group based upon their own individual experiences are delusional, because it's not humanly possible to accurately assess the collective state of millions of people based on anyone's individual experiences. Those negative assessments about our group were embedded into our minds by the white society that writes all of our narrative, that controls our media images. They keep us believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves because it makes us easier to control. This is the truth of our plight and condition. The reason why many black people insist that they confirm their negative assessments about our racial group based upon their own individual experiences, although they've in fact not, is because once a false belief has been successfully embedded into the human mind, the person will then only notice those incidents that appears to confirm the false belief and will become psychologically blinded from noticing a greater amount of evidence refuting it. And then based upon this psychological blindness, they will insist that they've confirmed the negative assessments, although they've in fact not. This is the truth of our plight and condition, and it has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth. Furthermore, this disclosure is totally consistent with history. Throughout history, those nations that were extremely oppressive did not abandon those proclivities very easily. They most often always reinvented them with much more sophistication. They've always developed methods of oppression that allows them to continue doing so, methods that are better suited with the changing times, methods that are not easily recognized by their victims. This is the hidden reality presently confronting black people. It's time to wake up to our reality. It is not a silly Willie Lynch myth. We're being oppressed through systems that the white society continually deploys against us. Wake up to our reality. One love and peace.